Okay, we may be online, we may not be. We will see. It's still telling me that it's directing, so hopefully we are online on LinkedIn now. If not, we are just recording, and you'll see this later. Technology, sometimes it works perfectly, sometimes it doesn't. And I'll switch my phone off as well, so we can just have a uninterrupted conversation with Mark. Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for. Actually, I was going
Hello.
to say for accepting my invitation, but you kind of invited yourself, didn't you? Which is really good.
Well,
I
it's a
like
mutual thing.
proactive.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I like proactive people because actually I did put on LinkedIn and on a few groups that I am looking for people who
Mm,
are working with leaders, who are working with one-to-one people from leadership area, or people who are working in the corporate or have their own businesses. So all sorts, but talking about leadership, talking about motivations, talking about psychological safety, and all
mhm,
these aspects, which are these days quite big topics. There is lots talk around them, lots of posts, lots of trainings and courses. But I thought the best way to kind of pass the wisdom on and experience is conversation. So thank you very much
mhm.
for raising your hand, and here we are today.
Indeed.
So Mark, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself first, and then we'll dive directly into motivation.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invite, Sonka, although I might have invited myself. I'm Mark Terrell, the creator of the Motivated Business Club and the author of Motivated, the Reluctant Leader's Guide to Building a Business that Sets You Free. And so my philosophy is very much based on the things that I learned in 30 years of running a family retail business, and also the things I've learned subsequently with regarding motivation in particular, how during that 30 years my motivation ebbed and flowed, a bit of like a roller coaster, and it got me interested in, well, why was that? And so why was I motivated in certain circumstances and why was I not in other circumstances? And that realization that actually I can control certain things, and motivation is something that I can work on and actually actively manage. And if I can do that, it gives me the energy I need to run my business. And that's the philosophy I work with my clients, understanding where they get energy from, making sure that they're doing things to fulfill those things, and then they're in a better place to transfer that energy to others. Because ultimately, I see leadership as a transfer of energy from one person to the others, whoever they're leading.
Oh, I love that. I work with energy a lot, so I love that the transformation of energy. Yeah, and you're
Mhm.
right. I never thought of it actually before. That when you're a leader or someone, it doesn't have to be the leader. There's anybody in your team is not motivated, and it's like, oh, another day you really pick up, and another way around. If somebody is really motivated around you, sometimes you don't even know why, but you're just going along much easier.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes down the line you find out that's not your thing, but that's the whole point.
Mm.
Because if I understand, the motivation for you is very much coming from knowing what motivates you. The reason I'm highlighting this is because there is so much pressure on leaders. You have to motivate your team. You have to motivate your team. You have to motivate your team.
Yeah.
And I think it's not quite fair. It's not the whole picture. Because if people don't know what motivates them, how on earth the leader should know? Sometimes we are good at spotting. Actually, I think you are more lightened up by this task. So how about?
Mhm.
But if we know, it's much easier to communicate with leader as well.
Yeah.
So do you agree? And I understand that's what you do. You help people to actually find that motivation. But before I go, I'll let you go into it. But I would like you to go into it like, imagine that I'm one of those people who heard about motivation like for
Mhm.
a millionth times, and it's just myth. And I think there is even a book about, no, it's willpower is myth, but
Yeah.
motivation, it's a myth. It doesn't exist because it was so much talked around and about. And some people are just not that convinced that it's important or even exists. So,
Well, so the first thing to do is understand what motivation actually is and what it stands for.
mm,
So motivation is the motive. If you break the word down into two words, motive and action, the motive being the reason and action the thing you do because of it. So essentially what that is, what motivation is, it's something that you do because you want to do it. And that reason can be obviously very personal. And a lot of people get mixed up with internal and external motivations. But that's when we talk about the reward that we get, whether it's internal or external. Ultimately, everything that we're driven by comes from an internal drive to do it, unless somebody else is telling us to do it against our will. And sometimes we have to do things, let's face it, against our will. Sometimes that's just a fact of life and fact of business. But we can make sure that we're doing the majority of times doing things that we want to do, and we're taking the action because we want to do it ourselves, then that's a much better place to start from. And also ultimately, you're not going to get that pushback from an internal thing, thinking, well, actually, or not thinking, just feeling. I think motivation is very much a feeling of whether you want to do it or not. And if you want to do something, let's face it, you get into almost like a flow state because you just get on with it. And I'm sure you've had times when you just do things and a couple of hours later you put your head up and think, oh gosh, where have those 2 hours gone? And then
yes.
there's the opposite where oh, have I only been doing this for 20 minutes? And the difference is that you're in one instance you're doing something that motivates you, and in the second instance you're not, and that can be make a massive difference with your productivity and the way you feel about your work.
So is it if we were given a kind of how to spot the motivation? So this is a good way to do it, because sometimes it's hard to just go wake up in the morning. It was like, okay, I'm going to look for my motivation. Motivation, kind of it's just not going to work. So
Mhm.
let's talk about ways how we can find out
Mhm.
what motivates us. And I love this energy exchange. There is like what I talk to my clients about is the energy bank and an energy account.
Mhm.
So what's taking energy out of you and what is giving you energy, what is recharging you. So would you
Absolutely.
work a similar way?
I do, and pretty much all the talks I do now when I'm talking at networking events and bigger events, I'm talking at an event on Thursday, and it's about managing time, managing energy, not just time. So
Mhm.
most people, when they're not being very productive, automatically think that they need to be more effective with their time. Now, that might be the case, but I think that actually most people should be paying more attention to their energy and where they get it from. And if you can do that, then you're going to be more productive. And also remembering that there's only a limited amount of time. We all have the same amount. We can't create more time, but we can create more energy. So if we have more energy, then the time we have will be more productive. So that's where I come from, and that's how I introduce the topic of motivation in many instances with regards to managing your energy and where you get it from at work, as opposed to just being a productive person that manages their time. Because I don't think you can really be as productive or reach your potential if all you're doing is managing time.
So is this is this motivational energy? I just made the term up. Motivational energy, is it transferable? So what I'm asking is, let's say the work doesn't satisfy you, you know that, but at the moment that pays the bills, and many people are there. Doesn't matter whether you're a leader, whether you're an employee. Many people around me are in that place, pays the bills, counting days to retirement or whatever that is.
Mhm.
So is it transferable? If people really find ways to recharge, not just sleeping and rest, but activities which motivates them, can they use to do find that that energy can be used, and it's easier to go through the day, it's easier to kind of get through those daily tasks, Monday tasks at work, without being as drained. Because what I'm getting is many people are just so exhausted sometimes from work that because it takes so much energy out of them, they don't really have time after work to kind of do anything fun. anything old. So how they can tip this element so they actually have enough energy so it gets them through the day and they are not as exhausted at the end of it.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So I've had lots of instances with working with clients where most commonly they've lost contact with the outcome or the difference that they make. So so they've concentrated on the thing they do. So rather than actually the outcome that they help to bring to life, they actually just concentrate on one thing, the thing they do. And then because that thing doesn't really light them up as such, they lose touch with the reality of the whole big picture, you could say. So just to put that into a little story. So I was doing a session with somebody well, quite a few years ago, actually. And she was identified as being predominantly motivated by making a difference. But I also found out at the same time that she didn't feel that she was making a difference. So I said to her, so what is it? You know, I know what you do. She was a lawyer, particularly she was a conveyancing lawyer. And I said, so you don't feel that what you do contributes, actually makes a difference to anybody or to the business or to your clients? So I said, I'm going to dispute that and I'm going to send you away and I want you to check through the feedback you get from your clients, because she had confirmed that she gets feedback from all her clients. So when she came back to me the next time, she said, I now understand the difference I make. I make a difference because I make the process easier, quicker, I'm very responsive, and actually what is generally something that people feel is a bit of a, difficult time in their lives, actually I make that less challenging. So I said, so you now understand that what you do does make a difference? She said, yes. And I understand now actually what I'm doing is helping my clients make that important next step in their life. It might be upsize into a bigger house or it might be downsizing, whatever it is, but it's allowing that person to make those things happen in their life. So of course I'm making a massive difference. And it changed the way she looked at her work. So even though we're just a lawyer, for instance, we're actually making a massive difference to somebody's life or maybe a business or whatever it might be. So it's really important that we connect to that outcome that we are working towards. So it's not just about what we do, it's what we help to bring into the world or the problem that we solve.
Yeah, so motivation, I'm 100% aligned with that, because thinking about that, motivation is closely linked to contribution for me as well. And I do see that especially in big corporates, people get completely disconnected with the final result. And sometimes they don't even know the bigger picture. And sometimes they just simply don't care, or is it that big that it's just not personal enough. So if you know that personal contribution to what we do, the motivation is increasing with the contribution, or understanding the contribution we are doing, and obviously the contribution must be aligned with our values. So it's like a little triangle for me: the values, the contribution, and the motivation.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just realized that it wasn't something I need
I
to
think
put.
there's a close connection between values and motivation, because when
Yeah.
you talk about values, what are they? They're the things that are important to you. And so if you think about motivation being the reason why you do something, then values and motivation are always going to be very
Interlinked.
closely linked.
But I also like your story, Mark. Yeah, I know you told me your story when we were preparing kind of agenda for this meeting. So I'll let you to say it. I'm not even gonna start because there's no. I'll just let you go into it fully.
Oh, well, so I alluded to it when I was introducing myself. So when I was running my retail business, I came into that straight from school. I was sort of dragged into it by my father at the time. Didn't really know any better, but actually it worked out okay. I enjoyed it most of the time. But as I said at the beginning of the podcast, there was times when I weren't quite so motivated. And what I realized after selling that business, and it wasn't for sale, just for a matter of interest, that we weren't actually actively trying to sell the business, but we had someone that came in and wanted to buy it.
Mhm.
So we weren't particularly prepared for the sale, but it went through. And when I had time to reflect, I realized that the times when I was most engaged or most motivated was when there was change going on. I had to make things happen, and innovation was high, and bringing new ideas into the business. When I wasn't so motivated was when I was just running the day to day, ticking along, and spending most of my time managing people. I can do the managing people bit a bit, but I don't want to make it the major thing in my work life. But that's what happened. So what happened in my situation was I gave up or didn't, and I ended up doing little of the things that motivated me, and then spent most of my time doing things that didn't motivate me. So I had the sort of ultimate double whammy.
Mhm.
So lacking those things that motivated me, spending most of my time that didn't motivate me, or in other words, like we talked about energy, not doing much of the things that gave me energy and doing a lot of things that sapped my energy. And ultimately, I was drained pretty much every day. I was drained.
Mhm.
And we talk about in business now, we talk about burnout and all the things that are associated with it. And I think motivation has a role to play when people get burnt out. It's because they're trying to do things that they're not motivated to do particularly. And so because of that, they burn themselves out because what they're doing is depleting themselves at work.
Mhm.
So what we need to do is make sure that our work is actually invigorating us and giving us energy as opposed to, sapping our energy.
Yeah. And I like your story because it taps into two levels. We already kind of went into a little bit your values, which I know you didn't mention in this part, but I know that what you were selling and what the retail was, it wasn't quite aligned with your values. So it was one reason why you moved away from it. But
Mhm.
also what you are saying there is that you could do the leadership just fine. There was no problem with that. But it just didn't light you up. It wasn't something that was giving you energy, was taking energy from you. And I
Mm.
see that a lot with leaders. People are being promoted or hired into positions because they think it's natural progress for them, or their management thinks it's natural progress and that's what people want, motivates them, more money, higher position. But many times it's not. And I think this is why it's very, very important to find out what motivates us and what works for us. Because it's one thing, yes, I'm a leader, I've been promoted and I've got this team, but at the same time, it means that we are many times removed from those tasks which got us there because we were good at them. So I just wanted to point that out, and it shows in your story really, really well. It's not
Mm.
like you couldn't do it. That's not,
Yeah.
you were a leader material.
I,
And
th I think a lot of people, when things aren't going well, they focus on skills,
mm,
which is important. We've got to have high skills, but there's no amount of skills will make up for the lack of will. So if
yes.
you don't really want to do something, just continuing to get skills to be able to do it is never really going to be the answer, is it? And like you've alluded to there, a lot of people get promoted from maybe a technical role into a management role,
Mm,
hoping, fingers crossed, that they've got the skills to be able to lead the team. But in most cases, a lot of cases I hear, and I'm sure you hear, is that those people are not actually motivated to lead the team. They might have all the skills, and that was pretty much me. I mean, I had the skills, I had personal skills, and I hadn't had the formal leadership training, but naturally, I was fairly good at
good
leading a
leader, yeah.
team. But there goes the problem: is that if you're naturally good at something, but actually it sort of saps your energy, what happens is that you get more given to you things that you don't want to do, even though you actually appear to be quite good at them. So
Yeah.
this isn't about the ability to do anything. It's about, yes, we need to have the ability to do something, but also we want the skills and the will to do, but have the both. That's the ideal scenario. And you can gain the skills, but it's questionable whether you can actually gain the will to
The
do something.
motivation. And I think just to close the loop on this one is that when we were talking about those values, when we were talking about the energy, what gives us energy and the contribution, So if somebody finds themselves in that position that actually I'm good at this, it comes naturally to me to lead people or whatever the position is. Well, it's not like I can do it, it's fine. I'm happy with that. So maybe look what is the contribution? Look what's there for you. What am I contributing into? Where I want this team to move on to? What is my kind of next step, next result? And find something what really sparks up. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you whoever's listening, we are not suggesting not to take the positions or anything. Just
No.
try to find out how much it's aligned with your with values and what's the contribution, and find that motivation in that in the triangle, and because long term it will be just less and less interesting role for people if they
Yeah.
don't find why they are actually doing it. So back to that why. And obviously,
Yeah.
Sinek and everybody, Apple are talking about the why is important. Why we
Well, the
do.
why is also important is that if you're in a leadership position, you've got to have a clear vision of what you're doing and why you're doing it and where you're taking your team. So there's another reason why you're doing it is important to understand, because you've got to understand it yourself so you can then communicate it to everybody. Where are we going? And I see a lot of people just lose track of where they're going. I know, I've had clients who have said, and I say, well, what's the vision of your team or your business? And the only thing they know about that thing is that they are aiming to double the turnover or double the profits, or so it's just about
Even
monetary
more,
value. And you think,
we are
well,
growing. We are
how
growing
how
business.
inspiring is that you're just going to double something?
Yeah,
And why?
definitely.
So why do we want? What's the outcome once we do double it? Is that just a
Yeah,
benefit for somebody else? So when they sell the business, it's worth twice as much. If that's the case, then what's in it for me? Why should I be bothered about that? And they wonder
yeah,
why motivation is lacking when that's the message they put out. It's just about, let's double our turnover. So,
yeah. Let's grow. Let's
yeah,
grow. That
yeah.
sounds, yes, and especially when you are already busy and somebody keeps telling you that you have to double or grow, whatever that
Yeah,
means. But
indeed.
I know you've got really nice, it's a 7 steps, I believe, process that
Mhm.
you take people through.
Yeah.
Um, so it is important on a personal level and obviously and on a team level. So I work a little bit more with teams. So I measure motivational drives on a team level. But
Mhm.
you do this in more personal level as well.
Yeah, that my typical client is an individual. They might have a business, but not always. And
Hmm.
so we always start with the first step of my process, which I call getting the measure of your business. But actually, it could be just as much getting the measure of your career as much as your business. And the M stands for mirror. So you need to put the mirror up and understand yourself, because I don't think we can all learn more about ourselves. And if you're familiar with Johari's window, it's about opening up those windows so that we get more understanding of ourselves and we learn more about others. And so that window of people understanding one another becomes bigger. And so with understanding, there's more trust and all those sort of things that go with it. So mirror is the number, that's the place we start. And that's about understanding what motivates them, their behavioral style, their character strengths. And there's other things that we look into depending on the situation. But if we don't put the mirror up, first of all, then we don't know where we're starting and we don't really know what that person is wanting, and
Mm.
also what they don't want as well. That's just equally as important. And start from there, as opposed to, rather than just, here's a training program and let's work through it.
Yeah.
No, we need to personalize it so it's right for you. And so we're not just giving you something that everybody does the same way. You do it your own way by understanding yourself first. And then everything from that point links back to understanding your drivers, your behavior style, and maximizing your character strengths.
Hmm. Yeah, and obviously, well, I didn't even realize you are using mirror expression as well. So welcome to Mirror in the Boardroom podcast.
Oh, of course, yes. Yes.
So we've got a very, very similar view on it and a reflection of it, pun
Mhm.
intended. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure we are actually going nicely through the main points we did. We did say we want to convey to people. I know we were talking about environment because it's easy, as you said, you give people and I give people time to kind of sit back and go through their kind of inventory, what's motivate them. But the time when people are in the thick of it, time in companies, it's limited. Some people may believe that we can expand time, still exploring that part. Uh, but time is, everything is under pressure, or
Yeah.
most of the things. Unfortunately, we don't have that breather. And I know we've got this really nice way to balance a high challenge and high support.
Mhm.
And I would like us to talk about that a little bit more because it shows my animals are trying to get and contribute. I'll ask them later if they've got
Okay.
something important to say. I'll just put it into comments. But yeah, high challenge and high support, which is many times not something we see because
Mm.
everybody gets busy. We're all at high, 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 but that support is less and less and less. And that's when people are actually completely losing track.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter about motivation, doesn't matter about anything really, because there's just not time to process and be on the
Yeah.
task.
Yeah.
Uh,
So when I was learning more about leadership, as I alluded to, when I was running my retail business, I didn't really have any formal leadership training. So
mm,
I came across a program that actually ticked all the boxes. And the program that I use, it works on three things. It's understanding the right mindset for high performance. It's understanding there's a process that you've got to follow. And that process has got to start with understanding yourself and actually having a clear vision of where you're taking your team, because
mhm,
ultimately, how can you lead without it? And then working from there with the skills you need at each point in that process. So the central mindset is this high challenge, high support. And like I say, it was a massive light bulb moment to me because I realized that I was far too supportive and not challenged enough when I was in my retail business.
mhm,
And the reason why this is important, the best way to explore this is what happens if we don't get the balance right, if it's not in balance. So we're talking about both and here. So it's high challenge and high support. It's not one or the other, and it's not your high challenge one day and high support the next. It's actually always operating from a position of high challenge, high support. So if we're operating, for instance, from a high challenge, low support situation, so we're a high challenging leader, but our support levels don't match our challenge. What happens there is that we create an awful lot of stress in our team because we're expecting a lot, but we're not there to support the team and give them what they need. Because ultimately, I teach my clients, you're there to support everyone in your team. So that make that be your priority. And obviously, you're also there to challenge them. So get that high challenge, high support. So if our challenge is not matched by our support, we cause stress. But if the opposite is true, then we're high support, low challenge. Then what tends to happen is that we create a team which is dependent on us because we don't have high expectations. If you're never going to get high performance if you don't expect it. So you need to bring up your expectations, and that's the challenge bit. So high challenge, high support is where you need to be. It's easier said than done, but that's the mindset. Work on that and always think about how you're operating from that position.
mm,
And that needs to be backed up by two things, really. The attitude has got to be right. So when I say attitude, I mean you have to have an attitude of high expectations, but also you need to have an attitude of catching people doing things right. So that's when you're seeing and being supportive is you're noticing what's right.
mhm,
And that's the two things with regards to the attitude. And then there's also a backup with regards to how you operate and see each person in your team. And that is a position of understanding that everyone needs positive regard. So you have positive regard for everyone in your team, no matter what type of personality they are. So let's face it, a team will be multifaceted and have different types of behavior, but ultimately
Let's
you
hope
need to
so.
have positive regard. But you also need to match that with genuineness. So having a positive regard of everyone is good, obviously, but if you don't have the ability to match that with genuineness, and when I say genuineness, that's when you need to give that harsh, sometimes seen as harsh, feedback when things aren't right. So not holding back when something needs to be said. And genuineness is, I like the word genuineness because you're just being genuine, and also you're being genuine with everybody. You'll be seen as someone who treats everybody fairly and in the same way. So genuineness is a perfect description in that you need to be genuine and consistent with everybody, because that's when people trust you. If you are not consistent with everybody,
That's where
then
the
that's when
trust
people
comes.
feel that they're being, picked on, or favoritism kicks in and all that sort of stuff. So that's why getting that balance right is so important.
This can take us completely like psychological safety and cognitive diversity away, which
Mm.
is pretty much my topic, but not
Yeah, not today.
not to let's measure it all, let's measure it all,
Yeah.
but not today.
Hmm.
And we are talking about motivation, and but also I when we talk about the motivation in this aspect, what I was thinking is that yes, there is a leader and there is a team, but if the support and the high challenge have to be in balance. But also, if for instance, for me, I'm very good at activating people. That's one of my strengths. I'm very good at getting people together. I'm in a team and activating them, and this is what we are aiming for. This is what we're delivering. The support part is not is a little bit like this for me, and I'm aware of it. And it's not to do with favorism of people. Obviously, I'm a human, but being aware of it, I could kind of keep it in check and come back to that genuine feedback.
Hmm.
But support is not my strength. I can be very task orientated and people orientated at the same time, but it's a little bit on my terms. So if I'm really busy and I have to get my stuff done, the support I knew was kind of lower. If I was
Right.
in nice flow and kind of that was over and I can get back to my team. Okay, what have I missed? Where we've been? First of all, my team was aware of it. That there is sometimes closed doors, even though obviously open office we're sat in a one space. But also, I ask for someone between who can be there when I can't, when my support levels are not available. So there was always someone in the team who was experienced in certain parts, or if I didn't have that available, there was between the team kind of making sure everybody understands their strength. So if they needed support, if they needed courage, if they need that kind of tap on the shoulder, they did it between them. So there is no massive gap and going up and down. So I just wanted to throw that in, that it again, it's back to that motivation and understanding ourselves. Because we can't be, or maybe some people can be high performance, high support all the time, and it's just natural state.
Hmm.
But if you are like me, fill the gaps. Fill the
Yeah.
gaps, create a space when that high support and a high performance can be achieved, when I can't deliver it. And it was a big one for me to learn, because then I wasn't like trying to do both when I clearly there were times I couldn't.
Mm.
And that's again leading to burnout, leading to stress, mistrust, because you react to one person, not to the other. And it's just literally where your stress levels are rather than where the preferences are. So it
Yeah.
is a really whole picture. So
Yeah.
that motivation part and understanding part of ourselves, that's where it has to start. And as I say, the inclusive environment and workplace starts in our minds, and it definitely seems to be the case for motivation as well. And you wrote a book about that, as you mentioned at the beginning. So where
Yeah.
can people get it?
Well, you can get it direct from me for my website. We can share
I'll
a special
post,
link for that
yeah,
if
I'll
needs be.
post it
And
after the live on LinkedIn. So please
and
share it.
as you'd expect, it's also available from Amazon in paperback or Kindle
Hmm.
form.
Brilliant. Can you show us
Um,
the cover? Have you got it handy?
I
So
have,
people know what
yes, I
they're
have got
looking
it.
for.
This is what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
looks like.
yeah,
That's what you
great.
need to look out
For
for.
visual people, so they know what they are looking for, what they're
Indeed,
looking
yeah.
for. Yeah,
I
brilliant.
needed you to prompt me to do that, otherwise that I would feel a bit awkward suddenly. So thanks for the prompts.
Did you? Okay, so obviously I picked up on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not naturally going to do that, so I needed a bit of encouragement. So thank you
all
for that.
right, okay. Well, not knowing that, but obviously reading into it, it's like, why he's not waving the book around?
Well, I mean, that's the importance of understanding what ourselves and taking responsibility for that. But when we're in a leadership position, then understanding what everybody in our team is so important. So my
Mm,
work is not just about individuals finding out about themselves. It's actually realizing that that person probably has to understand other people. And so just by understanding more about yourself, you can understand that those people might be driven by different things than me, even though they might be showing the same behavior.
mm,
Actually, it might be driven by completely different things. And that's an important thing to always remember. Just because they're doing something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's driven by the same thing as somebody else.
yeah. Yes, and again, my brain is going because we are so, and that's why the cognitive diversity, I'm so passionate about finding out about
Mm,
people, because we are so easy to conform to norms,
mm.
and work environment is nothing but norms. That's the
Yeah,
culture. Everybody agrees to certain norms, but it doesn't mean it's natural to us. And I keep repeating this because there's two different things. And sometimes we don't even realize we are conforming to norms, thinking it just became our second nature, but it's still
hmm
our second nature, isn't it? Not what's not natural to us
right,
as
yeah,
we are. So
yeah. Can I
is
just go back to
yeah.
just performance in particular, just to mention
Mm,
something that's come to mind? So I've read a lot about how performance in sport is sort of how it's coached and how
mhm,
in particular when you get to elite support when they need to gear up for certain occasions. So for instance, we've got Wimbledon coming up. So
big season.
every person with in tennis, so every person that's taking part at Wimbledon will have their own um, plan with regards to building up to that event. So if we're going to perform at our best, take a leaf out of elite sport in that they don't plan to be at their absolutely 100% performance every day of the week or every week of the year. They have certain times when they know that they need to be in peak performance, and that tends to be the majors like the Wimbledon and US Open and Australian and French Opens. And so what they do is to make sure that their schedule leads to them being at their best for those weeks. And this resonates particularly with me because going back to my retail days, there are certain times in the year where you are naturally going to be busier and you need to gear up for them and you need more energy. And that being Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, all those sort of events. So you have to gear up for them and plan in advance to make sure that you're geared up, not only yourself, but your team's in position, ready for that extra lift in sales so you can cope with it. So when we're talking about that, when we talk about performance overall, yeah, motivation has a big part to play, but also we've got to make sure that we are managing our energy to perform when it matters most, and not performing like, like a someone that expects to be able to perform at the best all the time. That's just not realistic. So
Mm,
think about when is it important to be at our best and make sure you're taking steps to be at your best for those important times in your business.
mm. Yeah, that's a very good point. So just managing it, manage your motivations
Indeed.
and performance. Yeah. So is there any, would you say that's the message, the last wisdom you would like to share with us, or is there anything else you would like to add, came to your mind as we were talking?
Well, we've covered a lot, but I think motivation is misunderstood, and I think if you think about where you're getting your energy from, and it's not like I need to go and listen to someone like a motivational speaker, because they can't really motivate you, and the reason being that they don't know what motivates you. There is a slightly there are some people that will know what motivates you because you have bought in to go into their event. So if you've gone into there and you've been taken in by their marketing, it's probably a message that you've bought into. So they'll know that you're motivated in a particular way. But if that's not the case, if you just showed up to an event and listened to someone who calls themselves a motivational speaker, the thing to think about is actually, are they motivating you or inspiring you? Because there's a big difference, because anyone can be inspired by anybody else, because most motivational speakers, I would say, are inspirational in that they tell a story. They tell a story of from being in this position of adversary, and they're struggling with something and they overcame it, and they tell that story so that we can then think, well, if they can do it, so can we. So they're inspiring us. They're not tapping into our inner drive, and that's what motivation is. It's understanding your reason to do what you do, and once you can do that and you understand it, you can actually use it to your advantage and have let's face it, a happier time at work, and that's what we all want, isn't it?
So let's take that inspiration and let's find our motive and take it into action. So
Perfect.
I think
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate your time. And Chet, I'll post all your details under the event on LinkedIn if people want to connect with you, ask more questions. We'll post a link for the book as well. It arrived happily for me
Excellent.
the other day, so it's next one to read. So I'm looking forward to it. And maybe one day when I read it and I have more questions, we can reconvene and talk about it a little bit more.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, have a lovely rest of the day. It's really nice and sunny. I'm going back to the garden.
I don't blame you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Bye.